So coconut oil is one of those things that has been demonized for years and called things like artery clogging and dangerous for your heart health and even toxic, mostly because it's high in saturated fat. But is it really as bad for our health as we've been led to believe? Or has this fear been blown out of proportion by outdated science and oversimplified advice? So that is exactly what we're going to be breaking down inside this video today. So most of the fear around coconut oil, it really started when saturated fat was blamed for heart disease. And because of the fact that coconut oil is about 90% saturated fat, it got tossed into the bad fat pile with no questions asked, or at least that's what it felt like. But not all saturated fats are created equal. And coconut oil is actually rich in lauric acid, which is a medium chain fatty acid that actually acts slightly differently in the body. So it's metabolized faster than some other fatty acids, and it may have antimicrobial effects as well. Meanwhile, heavily processed seed oils like canola and soybean and corn somehow got branded as heart healthy, despite being high in fragile omega-6 fats that are prone to oxidation and can drive inflammation when consumed excessively. Like how that happened doesn't really make sense to me. So let's take a look at what the research actually says. So just for a bit of context, first of all, LDL cholesterol is often called the bad cholesterol because higher levels have been linked to cardiovascular disease, while HDL cholesterol is considered the good cholesterol, as it's more so been linked to having a heart protective effect. Now, those labels are very much oversimplified and generalized, and it's often the ratio between the two that actually matters more than the individual numbers themselves. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to refer to them as LDL being the bad and HDL being the good, so that we're not here for hours and hours. But then on top of those two, we also have total cholesterol, which is a combination of your LDL, your HDL, and a portion of your triglycerides, which are another type of fat found in your blood. So high triglycerides can also raise your heart disease risk, especially when paired with low HDL or high LDL. And again, I won't go too deep here, but I wanted to give you a quick snapshot of what these mean so that the studies that I mentioned actually make sense, again, without spending hours talking about it. So let's get into the science. So a 2020 meta-analysis published in Circulation found that coconut oil does raise LDL cholesterol, so the bad cholesterol, compared to vegetable oils. But it also found that coconut oil raises HDL, so the good cholesterol, which those seed oils that I mentioned often don't. So another 2018 randomized trial in BMJ Open compared 50 grams of coconut oil, olive oil, and butter per day, and they found that coconut oil raised HDL, the good cholesterol, the most. It didn't raise LDL more than olive oil, which is a heart-healthy oil, and actually performed better than butter overall. And then in a 2025 systematic review of 26 different studies, researchers found that coconut oil may not significantly raise total cholesterol, and in fact, in some cases, especially among overweight individuals eating a whole food diet, it actually lowered triglycerides. So what I will say is that context really matters, and most of these studies compare coconut oil to so-called vegetable oils, which usually mean oils like olive oil or sunflower oil used in home cooking. But that's very different from the heavily processed seed oils like canola, soybean, and corn oils that are used in ultra-processed foods or deep fryers, for example. And that is a big distinction and one that is often blurred in headlines. So on the note of seed oils, let's just quickly talk about them for a second. So seed oils are usually ultra-refined and they're extracted with chemical solvents, like hexane, for example, then bleached and deodorized and exposed to high heat during processing. They tend to be high in linoleic acid and omega-6 polyunsaturated fat that oxidizes easily, especially when heated. So when these fragile fats oxidize, they can form harmful byproducts like aldehydes that contribute to inflammation and oxidative stress and even endothelial damage. So while they may lower LDL in the short term, there is no long-term evidence that cooking with refined seed oils improves health, especially when they're used for deep frying or in high heat situations. And in fact, excess omega-6 intake is linked to higher levels of systemic inflammation, which plays a central role in nearly every chronic disease from metabolic syndrome to cardiovascular disease to autoimmune conditions. And yet they're still often considered the safe option and marketed as heart healthy. Like, make that make sense. So back to coconut oil, is it good or bad for our health? And here's the truth. coconut oil is not a miracle food, but it's also not the villain that it's made out to be. So we know that coconut oil raises HDL, the good cholesterol. It may support metabolic health in some people, not all people, but some. It outperforms butter in most lipid studies. It's stable at high temperatures, which means it's really good for cooking purposes. And it's minimally processed if you are buying virgin or extra virgin coconut oil. The downsides to coconut oil is that it may raise LDL slightly in some individuals, although those results have been very inconsistent amongst different studies. And it's not something that you necessarily need to eat by the spoonful, but it is definitely not as bad as it's often made out to be. Now, some of you may be wondering how it compares to extra virgin olive oil, and I've briefly mentioned that before. Extra virgin olive oil is incredibly well researched, and it does remain one of the best fats for cardiovascular health, but it's not the best for high heat cooking. Its lower smoke point and delicate polyphenols mean that it can degrade a lot faster under intense heat. And it's for that reason that I actually don't use it for any cooking at all, not even frying anymore, although I used to, but not anymore. I literally only use it in salads or for dressings or things like that where no heat is applied. And that's also where coconut oil outshines it, because it is saturated fat, or it's 90% saturated fat, so that structure makes it far more stable at high temperatures. So it's less likely to oxidize or form toxic compounds when you are pan frying or sauteing or roasting your vegetables or food. But just make sure that if you do decide to buy coconut oil, that you're buying the virgin or extra virgin coconut oil, the cold pressed and unrefined kind, because these ones are minimally processed and they retain beneficial antioxidants and polyphenols in them. So I honestly don't know if I was half asleep during that lecture or if it was really never explained that well. But when I was studying, all I remember being taught was that coconut oil is made of 90% saturated fat and essentially is therefore bad because saturated fat increases LDL levels and that increases our risk of heart disease. And so basically we should stay away from it. That is the gist of what I remember, at least from when I was studying to become a dietitian years ago now. So because of that, 4 years, I avoided it completely, thinking that it was harmful and artery clogging and just something to stay clear of. But then, like with a lot of things in nutrition, it seems, I started digging a little bit deeper into this. And what I found was very different from what we were told, or at least what I remember. So the bottom line, I would rather cook with coconut oil than industrial seeds any day of the week, hands down, because it is stable, it's minimally processed, and the research doesn't show it's harmful when used in moderation and in a balanced diet. So I still love olive oil, like I mentioned, for drizzling and dressings, but I don't use it when cooking things, and coconut oil definitely wins for that part. Now, that being said, is coconut oil the best oil for cooking? Not necessarily. So there are other traditional fats like ghee and tallow that not only handle high heat better, but also offer unique nutritional benefits as well that many of us don't even consider, or at least I didn't until recently. So I will be diving into that in a future video. So if you are curious about which fats are actually safest and healthiest to cook with, then make sure you're subscribed to my channel and hit the bell so that you don't miss it. And if you found this video helpful in any way, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below because I'd love to know what you cook with most or your preferred oil that you use. All right, that is all for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.